Stephanie, and welcome to the Reading Room. This is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I do my best to keep it spoiler-free, or at least I'll warn you and give you timestamps if I'm going to spoil something. And as I say in all my reviews, these are solely about the books, not about the authors as people. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the books that I read in May. So first up was One by One by Freida McFadden, which I bought on impulse at Target, just because I have enjoyed her work in the past, but let's go ahead and see what this one promised. Claire Matchett needs this trip. It will be a break from work and raising children, a chance to repair her damaged marriage, a week of hiking and hot tubbing with friends at a luxurious hotel in the woods, disconnected from the pressures of real life. Then, on a lonely dirt road, Claire's minivan breaks down. With no cell reception, the group has no choice but to walk the rest of the way to their remote accommodation. But the forest is dark and difficult to navigate, and hours later, they are lost. Hopelessly lost. As they venture deeper into the woods, the members of their party are struck down mysteriously, one by one. Are they being hunted? And by what, or who? As Claire's dream vacation descends into a nightmare, something becomes clear. Only one of them will return home alive. This is a taut story of betrayal and survival from New York Times bestselling author Freida McFadden that will leave you wondering if there's any way out of the woods. So I'm going to say I picked up pretty quickly that this was an earlier work by McFadden, and I am very happy to say that she has grown as a writer. I actually flipped to the copyright page and saw that this was self-published in 2020 by her, and then picked up by a traditional publisher, which after reading it, it makes a lot of sense. This did not read as well as some of her other work. It was very basic. It was definitely a quick read, and for the most part, it did hold my attention. But again, it was just really basic, and again, really glad to say that she has grown in her writing abilities. The book is about 260 pages, so fairly quick read, and the plot does keep moving. But it also gets repetitive, as there's not much depth here, and there's not much going on. It's them stuck in the woods. If Basic Bitch were a book, it would have to be this. So a lot of the plot hinges on characters making really poor decisions. I did a wine club episode on this because I had to talk about spoilers, because I can't really say too much in this review without giving certain things away. But the characters are going on vacation, they get lost in the woods, and my biggest question is, y'all, how big are these woods? Like, how did you get this lost when it doesn't seem like it's that complex to navigate? And why didn't they just get back on the road that they drove in on and follow that back out? They know that leads to civilization. I did see a review on Goodreads that complained about Claire, so our leading lady, complaining about the mosquitoes and saying how unrealistic that is for being set in Colorado. As a Coloradan, I would like to invite that reviewer on some hikes that I have done in our great state of Colorado. While the mosquitoes here are nowhere near as bad as they were when I was growing up in Minnesota, with all that humidity and 10,000 lakes attracting every mosquito in the tri-state area, we still have mosquitoes here in Colorado. I once came home from a hike with well over 100 mosquito bites. But I too, like Claire, have type O blood, and apparently that is just the nectar of the gods to these vicious little vampires. Lastly, on the book, I will say that the twist did surprise me, but I didn't like it. And I kind of had an idea of how it would play out, given how McFadden wrote some of her misdirecty scenes. At the end of the day, I'm giving this 2.5 stars. I wanted to give it 3 just on the merit of her other work, but I can't. It's not the worst thing I've read, and actually wouldn't be that bad of a book to read on a plane just to pass the time, but this is definitely one I don't need to reread. It really reads like a first draft. It's kind of like a house. It has walls, but there's no furniture in it. Next up was The Cliff House by Chris Brookmyre, and man, May was not off to a good start, as this book was also let's just say not great. Let's go ahead and see what the book promised to be about. Jen Dunn is 42 and getting married for the second time, but that doesn't mean she can't go all out for her bachelorette weekend. She's booked 3 days of super exclusive luxury and accommodation on a remote Scottish island for herself and 6 other women. There's Jen's tennis coach and a fellow tennis-playing fashionista, a famous pop star that pop star's estranged ex-bandmate, plus Jen's future sister-in-law and the sister of her first husband. The helicopter won't be back for 72 hours, and they have the island all to themselves. Or so they think. As the cocktails flow, old grudges begin to emerge and tempers to fray. Then, one of the women goes missing. The others receive a threatening message urging one of them to confess a terrible secret. But whose secret is it? Each woman has a darkness in her past she's reluctant to admit. But they'll all have to come clean if they want to make it off the island alive. Beautifully written, with twist upon twist, The Cliff House is an entertainingly closed-circle mystery that offers a modern take on a classic crime fiction form, proving once again that McIlvaney Prize winner Brookmyre is one of the genre's most versatile talents. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the back cover copy some credit, as there sure are twists upon twists in this. And thriller authors, it's not always a good thing. I don't need 95 twists, I just need a good story. The real problem here is how slow and kind of boring this ended up being. I guess it technically is billed as a novel of suspense, but I gotta ask, where was the suspense? This was really drawn out, and this is the definition of a slow burn. If it was gonna be going any slower, we'd be going backwards in time. Oh, wait, we kind of do, because the majority of the book is spent on like past events that led these women to this night of secret spilling. And some of their secrets are bland as hell, yet they treat it like this big to-do if anyone were to find out. This too, I'm also doing a wine club episode so I can talk about the plot in detail and not worry about spoilers, because you may enjoy this, I just happen not to. I also felt it was really hard to keep the characters straight in the beginning and remembering how they're all connected. Like, there's a character named Nicolette, and honestly, for the longest time, when I'd get to her chapters, I really had to think about who she was and why she was here. So not only is this boring, but then it drives off the cliff with how many twists it's throwing at us and how over the top and ridiculous everything gets. 80% of this was pretty boring, and then the last 20% is what I imagine watching Cocaine Bear is like. It's unhinged, but you also can't help but watch. I have to say, I started skimming at the 70% mark until we finally meet our little baddie, and then it was just, I too ended up giving this 2.5 stars because I was bored for most of it, and then felt like I was watching a soap opera at the end with twist after twist after twist. I've read other reviews that said they really love his writing, and especially for like his other books that he's written, and I do want to give him another shot, but at the end of the day, this was just okay. Why? Why was May off to such a poor start for my reading? It did not get any better with my next read, which was The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. This was the pick for my May's read for my book club, so let's go ahead and see what's promised. The House of the Spirits brings to life the triumphs and tragedies of 3 generations of the Trueba family. The patriarch, Esteban, is a volatile, proud man whose voracious pursuit of political power is tempered only by his love for his delicate wife, Clara, a woman with a mystical connection to the spirit world. When their daughter Blanca embarks on a forbidden love affair in defiance of her implacable? It's implacable. Like, you can't be placated. Implacable? I'm gonna say implacable. Her implacable father. The result is an unexpected gift to Esteban, his adored granddaughter Alba. This beautiful and strong-willed child will lead her family and her country into a revolutionary future. One of the most important novels of the 20th century, The House of the Spirits is an enthralling epic that spans decades and lives, weaving the personal and the political into a universal story of love, magic, and fate. I still have my bookmark. I was bored, and I was getting lost, and I don't know if maybe it's a translation thing or a writing style thing, but I'm sorry, I don't get the hype, and I don't think this is one of the most important novels of the 20th century, because I couldn't even I couldn't even do it. I don't want one paragraph to last an entire page. I actually ended up doing something that I didn't think I would do this year, and I DNF'd this. You don't understand. I do not finish books. The last book I DNF'd was in like 2012 when I stupidly decided to try and read 50 Shades of Grey. I have not DNF'd a book since then, and this broke that. I couldn't. I would read 2 pages and realize that I had comprehended nothing. It was slow, disjointed, and am I really supposed to sympathize with someone who essays people and is basically a PDF file? If you know, you know. I also couldn't really understand what time period this was in. There were like some references to war, so I assumed early 1900s, like World War I, but then other things that would happen that made it seem like we're still in the 1800s. So who knows, and I truly don't care because I'm done. I cannot force myself to read this. I think I was honestly 2 pages in and jumped to Goodreads to see if there was something wrong with me, which the jury is still out on, but I was not alone in struggling with this. Even my own mom said she had to abandon this. I did like the magical realism aspect. I liked the idea of following different generations of the same family, but this was a slog and just kind of depressing. I've heard other reviews about the author saying that she's a great writer, that they love her work, but at this moment I am not compelled to snag another title by her in my lifetime. Maybe if I have kids, they can pick this up and continue the generation, because it ain't me. Next up was The Vacancy in Room 10 by Seraphina Novaglass, and I got this as part of my book drop subscription and have read her previous novel On a Quiet Street, and I do remember liking that and liking her writing, so I was pretty excited to get this. Plus I was seeing it all over Bookstagram, so excited that I got it. But let's go ahead and see what the book promised. When Anna Hartley's husband, Henry, calls her with a terrible, guilty confession, she can't believe what she hears. It has to be a bad joke. The mild, predictable artist she married would never hurt a fly, let alone commit murder. But her confusion turns to horror when police find his body washed up on the banks of the Rio Grande. Desperate for answers to the millions of questions his untimely death has raised, Anna checks into the Sycamores, the rundown motel turned apartment Henry rented as an art studio. As she absorbs every bit of gossip the eclectic mix of residents are willing to share about her husband and each other, she begins to piece together a picture of a very different man than the one she married, and the life he led behind her back. The more she learns, the less sense things seem to make. She finds herself wondering, did she ever really know Henry at all? But Henry's secrets aren't the only ones. As Anna's search for clues expands, Cass, the mysterious jaded hotel manager, seems more and more determined to keep Anna in the dark. And when threatening letters start appearing at her door, Anna has to decide what's more important, the truth or her own safety. So all in, I really did like this. The characters are complex, flawed, and relatable. I was curious to see how our main characters, Anna and Cass's stories, would end up intersecting. I do think I liked Cass a bit more than Anna, sorry Anna, but you do make some dumb choices. But I still understood where she was coming from. She's grieving, and I could cut her some slack. But watching Cass grow and evolve, I thought was really done well, and I was really rooting for her. I also really love the group of misfits that live at this apartment complex and how they kind of become a found family. It was really great. The only thing I didn't love was our villain at the end, and I got some secondhand embarrassment from their speech and actions. But really, that is my only criticism of this, the over-the-top antagonist. Otherwise, I was hooked and had to keep going back to this and blowing off all my other responsibilities to read it. I loved the mystery, I love that there were enough red herrings to keep me guessing, and I do think that the twists worked really well here. They didn't come out of left field and worked with what we already knew. I loved that the answers were there. I did put together one of the twists right before it was revealed, but that could have been Glass doing that on purpose, so I'm not going to toot my own horn too much there. I also thought this was a pretty quick read at just under 300 pages. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I was entertained, and there was really only one thing that bugged me about this. Well, I guess maybe 2, but it's a really minor thing. The title kind of doesn't make sense. It's catchy, But the vacancy in room 10, there's, people are in it. It's not vacant. Room 10's occupied. But that aside, it's still a good title, and I see why she picked it. And again, I still really enjoyed this read. Next up was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, and I got this for free from Book of the Month as it was the pick for the Book of the Year. And I've also seen Jimenez all over Bookstagram, so I was excited to finally get to read one of her titles. So let's go ahead and see what this promised. Fair warning, I'm probably going to switch how I say the main character's name. I believe it is probably meant to be Brianna, but I have a really good friend named Brianna. Both are probably going to come out of my mouth. Dr. Brianna Ortiz's life is seriously flatlining. Her divorce is just about finalized. Her brother's running out of time to find a kidney donor. And that promotion she wants? Oh, that's probably going to the new man doctor who's already registering 80-7 on Brianna's pain in my ass scale. But just when all systems are set to hate, Dr. Jacob Maddox completely flips the game by sending Brianna a letter. And it's a really good letter, like the kind that proves that Jacob isn't actually Satan. Worse, he might be this fantastically funny and subversively likable guy who's terrible at first impressions. Because suddenly he and Brianna are exchanging letters, sharing lunch dates in her sob closet, and discussing the merits of freakishly tiny horses. But when Jacob decides to give Brianna the best gift imaginable, a kidney for her brother, she wonders just how she can resist this quietly sexy new doctor, especially when he calls in a favor that she can't refuse. So this was fine, I guess. I had an open mind going into this, knowing that it's book 2 in a series, but truly I don't think that mattered. I don't feel like I was missing that much, maybe like a few references here or there, like appearances from other characters that were featured in the first one, but I was still able to follow the story. But I have to say, romance isn't my favorite genre. And I did start out liking this. I did think it was funny and clever at the beginning. But then it just kind of kept getting harder and harder to pick up. It was just a little too hallmarky and too angsty at the same time for my tastes. And Brianna really started to drive me up the wall. I like that for the most part she's pretty confident and sure of herself and isn't afraid to truly just be herself. But by the end, I kind of just wanted to slap her. Like, where did the funny smart girl go that we had at the beginning? Did she have a brain transplant off page while her brother was getting his new kidney? I don't know. And Jacob? He's great. But what flaws does this man have? He's perfect. He is so friggin' perfect. He's like the prototype for a Stepford husband. At some point, he kind of started reading how I would have written a boyfriend when I was 13, and I knew nothing about how men really are, how grown women are, or how relationships work. Like, he's not even a pretzel. He's a Twizzler with how much bending over backwards he has to do to accommodate Brianna, who at times treats him like crap, but he just keeps coming back for more. The book also has like every single romance trope imaginable in it. Fake dating, coworkers, recovering from recent heartbreak, miscommunication, and then one I can't really talk about without spoiling anything. But it's the miscommunication that started to turn my vision red while I was reading this. They're both doctors in their 30s, but refuse to have a simple conversation or explain anything. It was infuriating, as this becomes the plot at the halfway mark, and I just couldn't take them seriously anymore. I hated going back and forth between them as they bottled their feelings up, and both made so many assumptions and believed they were right. You're doctors. Get a second opinion for Pete's sake. This just really slowed the book's pacing down to a freaking crawl, and it gets so freaking repetitive. We go over and over the same issues again and again and again and again. I get it. Let's move on already. To say a few good things, I really did like the letters that they wrote to each other, and I loved both of their families. I also liked their romance at times, but learn how to talk. You're adults. Use your words, or at least put them down on paper by writing each other another letter. I also did appreciate the authenticity of Benny's experience, and I do understand them better with the author's note at the end. At the end of the day, I have to give this 2.5 stars. God, that's like the rating of May. I think if the pacing had been tighter and we didn't have so much repetition of their internal monologues and issues and angst, this would have been a solid 3-star read. But the tone was just weird for me with this. It's like too twee and too cynical and angsty at the same time. I'm debating if I want to pick up another work by Jimenez. I probably will, just because I didn't absolutely hate this, and I would like to see if maybe this just was not the right book. But I honestly don't understand how this won Book of the Year. Alright, my last read for May was She Left by Stacie Grey. I also got this from the book drop this month, and since this book is about an event called the Memorial Day Massacre, it jumped to the top of my May to be read pile, and I'm really glad it did. Let's go ahead and see what the book promises. On the night that changed everything, Amy Brewer walked out of a house party, trudging angrily away from the friends who made her feel like she didn't belong. Within the next hour, all 5 of those friends would be dead. The Memorial Day Massacre, as it came to be called, rocked their small California community, and Amy, the girl who had walked away just in time, couldn't escape the media circus or the guilt. 20 years later, 10 people with connections to the crime have been invited to a remote cliffside house by a journalist looking to do a story on the murders. But the group quickly learns the event is not what it seems. As the storm closes in and the guests begin to die, Amy realizes there is someone in the house who knows more than they admit about what happened the night long ago, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. So this was a locked room murder mystery that I really thought I had figured out at the halfway point and was only partially correct, so it ended up surprising me in the end, and in a good way. And it made sense. It wasn't a random, I'm the killer, haha, kind of scene. It was also different than other locked room murder mysteries that I've read, that not everyone who's invited had something to do with the original tragedy. There are some motivations and suspicions on others, but it was a neat way to do it, as not all of the players are directly responsible for what happened. Plus, there are some characters in this that just are terrible people, so I was really ready for them to start being picked off one by one. I did get some unreliable narrator vibes from our main character, Amy, who ends up going by a different name when we catch up with her 20 years later, but I still liked her and wanted to know what happened that night and how she figured out what was going on at this reunion of sorts. The pacing and stakes were also really well done in this. Now, weather does play a role, and at times it did feel a little bit too convenient, but it really did add to the atmosphere and tension, so I'll allow it. The pacing was really great, and we have a nice mix of action scenes, doubts being cast around, suspicious behavior, and the contemplation and looking for clues. I was never overwhelmed, nor was I bored. All in, I really liked this, and I gave this 4 stars. I will say that I think if I think about it too much, especially some of the setup, I might start to have some more questions about it, but I'm going to focus on the positives and say that this is a really decent locked room mystery read. So if you have any recommendations for what I should add to my to be read pile for June, please leave your recommendations in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next month in the reading room.